Hello, and welcome to Savage Garden, an interview with the vampire podcast, sampling immortality one morsel at a time. I'm Kat, and joining me on this journey is Naomi. And today we're here to delve into season one, episode three, Is My Very Nature That of a Devil, which is actually a super short episode. Naomi, did that surprise you on a rewatch? Because it did for me. I kind of sat down, settled in, snacks for an hour, and was like, oh, I've only got 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's a really interesting episode because it is only 40 minutes. It is super speedy. It covers a very short period of time in 1917, but it also features probably the two most iconic scenes in the entire series. The coloreds only, no whites allowed sign, which will live, I think, in infamy on social media forever. I think I love seeing people posting that and then realizing, hang on a minute, is that from Interview with the Vampire? I think that particular screenshot has just gone everywhere, and I know Jacob Anderson is thrilled about that. And then, of course, the "I heard your heart's dancing" scene, which is
Yeah.
amazing, amazing, amazing. And we will talk about that when we get to it. This episode is directed by Keith Powell, who is apparently an actor who is also in 30 Rock, and he directs the next episode as well. And it is written by our wondrous showrunner, Roland Jones, and Hannah Moscovich, who is one of the staff writers on Interview with a Vampire. And yeah, it's this episode is all about wouldn't life be better if men could actually communicate? Because, oh, God bless them. I love Louis. I love Lestat. They both hurt each other terribly, repeatedly throughout this entire episode. And I would say without really meaning to, but Louis does get a little bit feral at one point, but it's just that they don't talk to each other. And if they truly talked to each other and really said what was on their minds without being petty or silly, uh, life would be so much better. But as we said, we are now in 1917 because in the last episode it skipped forward so much because we've glossed over the honeymoon years. And I'm sure that next series they will pick up on that a little bit because Louis sure just skips over 5 years very swiftly. So they've now been together for 7 years and the cracks are slightly beginning to show. So it's been 7 years since they met, since they married. They're now living together in the house on Rue Royale very happily. We start off with a lovely scene of them on the bench in Jackson Square. And I love that the show made clear that they're friends, that they love just being together. Louis just reading his book and Lestat chatting away, that Lestat has decided to I feel like Lestat goes and finds out these little key facts so that he can talk to Louis and impress Louis and have something to kind of engage his interest, which I think is adorable. And we've got Lestat in that suit, which we later find out in series two is Louis's favorite. And I couldn't decide what color it is. Is it brown? Is it maroon? Is it like russet brown? It really goes well with Sam Reed's coloring. I'm surprised it's Louis's favorite, but it's a very warm color because when we see him, he's wearing this very warm color, and then you've got Louis looking phenomenal in the pinstriped affair, and they're now at their part in their relationship. We're having a bit of gentle bickering, but then Louis basically decides to turn vegan. Now we have a lot of vegan friends, so we love and support our vegans, but he basically gives this entire speech that he doesn't want to eat people anymore, which obviously he's a vampire, so that's not really going to work. And he only wants to eat bad people. And Lestat is quite dismissive of this. And in the book, of course, Lestat starts out exactly the same way. He too only wants to eat bad people, and then he changes along the way. In fact, in the books, spoiler alert, Lestat eats a baby. Just like
No.
literally snaps on a poor beggar woman and her baby in a church. I do wonder if they're going to have Sam Reed scoffing a baby. We've sort of already seen it in the Mardi Gras scene, so I wonder if they're just going to leave that there or whether they're actually going to have him do it. Sort of doesn't quite fit with this version of Lestat, but it'd be very dark if they do.
Yeah, I mean, we know there's the whole taboo with killing children and whatnot, but then sort of looking at something like The Walking Dead, it does happen quite a lot more often in TV than film. I mean, Carol from The Walking Dead, I don't know how she was ever allowed near children because every child that she came into contact with on that show ended up dead and zombified.
Oh yeah, she
Um,
had to kill a lot of kids, didn't she? That was rough.
there was like obviously her daughter went missing and ended up zombified in Herschel's barn. And then there was, there's other kids that she just told to look at the flowers and then like shot them or whatever. So, I think that, TV audiences can handle little bit of infanticide. And if they're going to let anybody do it, I'm sure, the audience would look the other way if it was Lestat because he is so charming when he wants to be.
That's true. That's true. I'm sure that Sam Reid could pull it off. Um, and this conversation is it's sort of sad because Louis sort of, I guess, reached the point in his life where he's like, "What am I? Why am I a vampire? What are we here for?" And it's the start of his disordered eating in a way, and kind of the start of his depression after this, because he links the eating of humans with morality and decides that this isn't something he wants to do. He wants to remove himself from that. He wants to snack on cats and rats and everything else, but it literally doesn't give him enough to feed on. And I do like that the show sort of goes there with a clear metaphor of his disordered eating, with him not being able to enjoy human blood. And we see that even in the present times in Dubai, that's something that stayed with him. He's found a way to manage it with a blood delivery, but he's still not eating human beings. And of course, Lestat, instead of trying to talk this through with him, doesn't really emotionally have the tools to be able to do that. And so he takes Louis saying, I don't want to eat humans anymore, as I don't want to be a vampire. I think I'm better than you. I don't want you. I appreciate this bond that we share is super special to you, but it means nothing to me. I just want to snarf on mice. And Lestat just takes it as him being like a profound rejection of him and everything that he is, and that Louis is ashamed of him. And if they'd had the ability to chat that through at that time, I feel that things would have been very different.
Yeah, and in classic Lestat, he is, instantly on the offensive. So, Louis comes to him with this and he's like, oh, a fish who doesn't swim, a bird who refuses to fly, he's belittling Louis's decision as well. It's like, well, what are you? If you're a vampire that doesn't eat, then what even are you?
Yeah, and then when he acts so impulsively as well, so he grabs the guy because he's comfortable that this person is, or that Louis tells him that he is like a villain, and snaps his neck so that Louis can eat. And it's sort of, I feel like one of Lestat's huge problems is that he hasn't had decent parenting and decent mentoring. His father was abusive, his mother withheld love, withheld education to keep him with her, although she does eventually help him to escape. And then, of course, he gets turned by Magnus and just gets left to get on with it in a horrific circumstances. So he kind of has this really tough, well, look, just get on with it. What are you whining about? Kind of approach to life. And he takes that approach with Claudia as well. That, well, look, bad things happened to me and I got through it. So I don't know what you're all complaining about, toughen up type thing. And of course, that's not the way to handle Louis. It's certainly not the way to handle Claudia. And his attempt of he just tries to fix things by like, right, so I've grabbed this person, he's a villain, snapped his neck, off you go, Louis. And then he's profoundly disgusted when Louis decides to eat the cat instead. And Sam Reid does very good disgusting face. It's amazing.
I can't say as I was too happy. I can't say as I was happy about seeing Louis eat a cat either,
Yeah, you see, I'm not. I don't have any pets and I'm not really a cat person, but I know that you have your cats. You have two cats or one cat?
We have two. I mean, you say you don't like cats, but you do like to go to a cat cafe on occasion and find the meanest cat there and pester it.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I like to go to these cat cafes and find the one that is incredibly grumpy because obviously the one that is incredibly grumpy, um, you have to respect them. They just sit there, they glower at everybody, and they immediately become my favorite cat in the entire place. And I like to feed them chicken while they then hiss at you. But yeah, I think I've just had bad experiences with cats. All the cats I've seen haven't been like fluffy, sweet lap cats. They've been terrible, eat your toes cats. So I'm not particularly. I get why. I mean, I feel like, and again, like Louis's morality is all over the place because I think it's with everything. He wants to be good, and he wants to believe that he's good. But he flip-flops all the way through about whether he's eating humans, whether he's not eating humans, what animals he's eating. I mean, if you're killing someone's pet, Louis, I mean, is this, there's not much sympathy for the poor animals here. And he has to eat. We don't think about the chickens when we're scoffing them. He is a feral little devil. And he is great in the scenes where Jacob Anderson is having so much fun in the scenes where he gets to like eat the animals because he's like absolutely unhinged, just like rah rah rah. It's very entertaining while Sam Reid is just there looking absolutely horrified. So Lestat's already feeling rejected, and then they go back to the Azalea where Lestat just starts acting up like the brat that he is. And this is where we get the entire sequence of Lestat. I don't know anything about ragtime. I feel bad about that because I would love to, but he sort of insults Jelly Roll Morton and then takes over in a wonderful show of showmanship. That is not Sam Reid doing the piano playing, although I think it is him in other scenes, but not on this one because obviously it requires an actual ragtime pianist. So they got a gentleman called Ethan Uslan, who is a ragtime pianist, and they brought him to New Orleans during the height of the pandemic, of course, because this was filming then. And they dressed him up the same as Sam Reid, and they gave him a vampire manicure. And then he is both playing the piano in terms of the hand double in this particular scene. And then, of course, because you can't really play the piano particularly well when you've got these like nails on, which I imagine, I mean, they all talk a lot about the nails. So I imagine before they got the acrylics, I mean, I can never do stick on nails. They must have popped off the entire time. You see certain shots where one of us clearly gone missing and everyone's like, you know what, fuck it. It's fine. We're just going to pretend that it just went somewhere. So he does, I can imagine that playing the piano with stick on vampire nails must have been quite challenging indeed. But they got Ethan to do the shot for the cameras, and then they brought him into the recording studio, and he is the pianist there, and I think it's a wonderful piece of music. But it's just all of this, like again, Lestat, why are we sort of showing up Louis in his place of business? I mean, I guess he's co-owner, but it just shows that we're now at the point where Lestat is so unhappy with Louis that he is kind of just acting out in all aspects. And it's a shame because we love them and we just want them to be happy.
But also, it's then revealed that actually Lestat he wasn't just showing off; he was doing it
No,
for a reason. He'd heard whispers that pianist was going to, leave him and move on with his business, and by kind of, I guess, humiliating him in this sequence, it then kind of knocked that confidence, kind of like he did with the opera singer in the previous episode, so that he was a bit more humble and kind of stayed around for a little bit longer.
not to be horny or main or anything, but we have to say that Sam Reid's hair during this little particular sequence, because it's sort of at the awkward bob length, because I think he had extensions in the first series, but when he's doing the piano and it's all flying over his head, so beautifully lit by Keith Powell. Yeah, he looks very, very attractive indeed, I have to say. It's a very, very flattering shot. And then, of course, we cut immediately to Daniel. We all need Daniel because Daniel is just like, uh-huh, sure, whatever. It's just like he just is not buying any of it. And then he starts talking about the vast differences between the 1970s recording, which is much more. What I like about it is that the original, sort of in this timeline, the original recordings are much more akin to the actual book, which is just Louis whining about how Lestat is the worst person in the main universe. And then we have here where Daniel sums up the entire series by saying it's a fucked up gothic romance. Correct! That should be the tagline. I don't understand why AMC hasn't used this as the tagline, because that's precisely what it is. And Louis responds, and it's a really interesting because Louis responds very strongly to a suggestion that he is a victim of abuse. And I mean, he very clearly is, but also that sort of takes him out of his power, I suppose, by saying that. And it's a very, I mean, the show looks at it in, I think, in a very nuanced way because he's a victim of Lestat's abuse, uh, physical abuse as the series progresses, and then is a victim of, oh, well, where do we even start with Amont? I mean, it's just years and years of gaslighting. It's gaslighting that Louis wanders into because, good Lord, does Louis play himself. But yeah, I can also understand why calling them abused and abuser Lestat and Louis is just, sorry, the other way around. It's just far too simplistic and devalues Louis and devalues Louis's power. But I do also love how wonderfully pretentious Louis always is when we go back into these sections. So after bitch slapping Daniel by pointing out that memory is very different, we talk about the odyssey of recollection, which is of course what all of this is. And then Louis sort of undercuts his beautiful, serene therapy tech bro approach by setting the tapes on fire with his mind. But Daniel just rolls with it. I feel like that's the benefit of Daniel. He just rolls with anything that happens.
Yeah, I think he's happy that it's not the Louis from the 70s again, who, that we know that ended badly, and that's why the interview was sort of terminated. So I kind of feel that he's appreciative that he's made it to what, the second or third round of interviewing now without being maimed in any way.
Yeah, no one has tried to eat him. Louis hasn't tried to set him on fire. He's not doing too badly, to be honest. He's doing quite well. He's doing quite well. I mean, he's also in a very plush, beautiful Dubai apartment being fed continually, which probably helps. I mean, personally, I'd be a little worried that they were fattening me for the slaughter. They were feeding me all these nice foods so that my blood would taste nice. But I, I feel like this story only really works if we assume that at this point Daniel is completely out of fucks to give.
Yeah.
He is old. He is sick. He is estranged from everybody in his life. Okay, let's go talk to a vampire for a bit. If he eats me, he eats me. And I think that's the only really way that it works. And his presence in this episode is pivotal, but quite minimal. And then we get to Antoinette. So I have mixed feelings on Antoinette, Miss Antoinette Brown. So as the series progresses and as we get to the finale, I do feel sorry for her because at that point she has been Lestat's mistress for years. I mean, years, probably what, a decade and a half? And I mean, obviously, people have different approaches to these things. I know quite a few people that have a husband and a boyfriend, and it's just like depending on where it is, it's quite perfectly acceptable. But obviously, here the key thing is this isn't really an open relationship. This is Antoinette inserting herself between Louis and Lestat. And you could argue that the fact that Louis just kind of leaves them and says, enjoy your night, means that Antoinette was almost given permission. But, you know, Louis is her boss. She knows they're a couple because practically the first thing she says when she gets in the house is basically, so are you two fucking? Everyone thinks you're fucking. How many beds are upstairs? And like, firstly, Antoinette, this is your boss. You know, let's a little bit of formality. And then she says that Lestat is confusing her because she assumes that they are a queer couple. So Lestat being all over her, as he is, understandably would be confusing the hell out of you if you thought that you were there, you know, just entertaining your boss's lover, and then all of a sudden he's making moves on you. I can get how confusing that is. But I feel that at this point, once it becomes clear that once she knows they're a couple, which she does the second she gets in the apartment, I think, like, just leave, Antoinette. I mean, I appreciate Lestat is very handsome. And even if we excuse the kind of the night together, she then never leaves. She willingly becomes Lestat's mistress for years. And I don't know what Lestat got out of that. She's not Antoinette in the book, she's Antoine, and Lestat loves her very much. I don't get the impression he loves her in this.
No, I feel in this it's 7 years that him and Louis have been together, and Louis is, taken this vow of veganism to a degree, and I think he says to Daniel, because of the fact that he's not been drinking the human, but his libido is not really there, and so Lestat obviously hasn't been, they've not been sleeping together as frequently as perhaps they had. Lestat is getting frustrated. He's mentioned previously that, he is was it non-judgmental, or, he's open to all options. He doesn't put himself into any defined box.
Non-discriminating.
That's the one, non-discriminating. And she is a way for him to get that release, which he clearly needs, but also it's a way to get at Louis.
Yeah.
Louis not paying him the attention that he needs, or in the way that he needs, and so he's going to get it from somewhere else. And it's kind of like he's dangling, Antoinette, with him being sort of all over, in a similar way to what he was like with Lily, in the hopes, I think, that will like snap Louis into action. But it doesn't at this point. Louis is so apathetic to the situation that he's just like, yeah, no, okay, you guys do you. It's like he knows Lestat works like this now, and he just doesn't really want a part of it at this point in time. So he just takes himself off for a little wander and leaves them to it. And then Lestat has kind of boxed himself in, where he now has to go through with it with Antoinette.
Yeah, and I feel, yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's because all Lestat wants is either Louis to join in, which again, he knows Louis is queer. He knows he has no interest in women. But what he wants is either for him to join in and be like, whatever the hell, or he wants him to kill her. He wants him to kill her. He wants Louis to, if not kill her, to react, to throw her out, to do something, because from Lestat's point of view, that means that Louis cares. If Louis kills Antoinette, if he throws her out, if he does whatever, then that is a sign, because of course Louis has never told him that he loves him. Louis has never said those words, and never has by the end of the series so far said those words. And I'm fairly sure that they're going to have him say them just before Akasha comes and takes him away. So that will be fun. But he's never said he loves him. And for Lestat, the fact that Louis does very clearly love him through his actions isn't enough. He needs big demonstrative demonstrations of love. And as you said, Louis is like, fine, this is who you are. I appreciate that. I don't give a fuck enough about this to do anything about it. And all Lestat takes that is, you don't love me. This is another sign that you don't love me. You don't care enough about who I am with to do anything about it. Whereas at the same time, Louis is feeling incredibly small, incredibly emasculated. Lestat has brought this woman into their home. She is a white woman, so Lestat can go places with her that he cannot go with Louis. It's just chaos all around because Lestat feels terribly small and rejected because Louis doesn't want vampirism and doesn't seem to want him, which is not actually the case. And Louis feels small because obviously Lestat is fucking around right in front of him with this woman. And I have to say, I do love Lestat. Very fond of Mr. Reid. Don't think the moisture has dried up quite as much in my body as much as when I heard the words bad daddy.
Yeah.
Major ick. Oh, it's just like, no. It's like an almost like, if I was Antoinette at that point, I'd have been like, ooh, no, you know what? You've just killed it. Just killed it stone dead. But of course, Lestat would have just eaten her at that point. But yeah, no. Literally, it's just like all of the moisture has evaporated from my body. It's no, very, very, very grim. I'm sorry, Sam Reid. I don't mean to be mean. It's just one of those lines you're like, and I love that Lestat is cringe at sometimes, but this is gross. And I know that it's just nonsense talk, again, intended to rile Louis up because all he cares about is Louis. But yeah, it's very unpleasant. And I hadn't realized until afterwards, there's a lot of foreshadowing with Antoinette in this episode because obviously Louis talks about how she's, when he comes back, he thinks Lestat's killed her, which he hasn't. And then later on, when they're talking about the relationship, Lestat says, "Oh, these flings always flame out." Poor
Wow.
Antoinette. Poor Antoinette. And then we get such a devastating scene, the "ain't I enough" scene. And that's the point you just want to bang their heads together because this is Louis in kind of a rare moment of absolute vulnerability with Lestat, basically saying, "Aren't I enough for you? I love you. You know, why aren't I enough?" And Lestat bursts into hysterics because the man has borderline personality disorder, and that's what he does when things get too real. He just laughs. And of course, the answer to that is yes. Louis is more than enough for Lestat. He is all Lestat wants. And I mean, this, like, we talk about Lestat being slutty, but if you actually look at the course of the series, so he was with Nikki, obviously, years before, and then supposedly went into the ground, although it's a bit unclear as to how much time he does spend in the ground because he also seems to have gone to an awful lot of operas and hung out with a lot of composers, and just generally had quite a nice time. But he was with Nikki, who was his sort of first true love, and then he finds Louis. And other than that, he has Antoinette. But again, Antoinette's not a brief fling. As we said, by the time the series ends, he's been with her for over a decade. This is like a man who is having just endless monogamous relationships. And all he wants is Louis, but he just can't quite bring himself in that moment because he is such a poor communicator to tell him. And that's sort of the beginning, I think, of the end of their relationship, really. I think this moment. Because I don't think they ever quite recover from it. But then I also love that Rena Jones and Hannah Moscovich immediately undercut the power of the scene with my favorite, which is the "of course" speech, where you get to see a man dying inside with every single repetition of the word. Because Louis immediately calls Lestat's bluff and goes, "Cool, so I can fuck whoever I want, right?" And the answer to that is, of course, no. No, this is not what Lestat wants under any circumstances. No. But it's a very, very funny scene.
I've got in my notes like there's a few too many of courses.
Of
The
course,
lady
of
does
course, of course,
protest.
of course, of course. And you just see Lestat is dying with every of course. Doesn't matter how many times he says it. It's like, wait, what? No, 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 no. I don't want you to sleep with anyone else. No, absolutely not. Look, Antoinette was just to rile you up in the hopes that you would quit eating mice, quit fucking around, and properly, recommit yourself to me. No, I don't want you with anyone else. Don't be so ridiculous. But by this point, like, he can't back down, can he? Because he's said he likes a little variety, and that as long as Louis comes home to him, it's fine, which is nonsense. It is not fine. Lestat is a very, very jealous man. But yeah, it's just, I don't think I have ever seen a scene of a man literally dying with every single repetition of a phrase. Poor Lestat, you brought this on yourself, my friend. You played yourself so badly when all you needed to say was, Louis, I love you, I'm sorry. But then, of course, Louis doesn't give him that back either. But it's a shame because Are I Enough is a declaration of love. He doesn't have to say the words for it to be a proper declaration of love, but the stat just isn't quite at the place where he can see it. It's a real shame. We get sort of the scene of them in the azalea. What I love is when he's meeting Jonah, when when Louis is meeting Jonah, you have Lestat in the background of every single shot, just kind of hovering there, clearly dying inside. I mean, to be fair to his credit, he allows Louis the opportunity to be with Jonah, but he's like hovering in every single shot in the background like a little jealous monster. And Jacob is hugely charismatic, I think, in these scenes. I mean, he's just got incredible chemistry with everybody. And then we get this very stilted aftermath of his hookup with Jonah, where they are undressing, and obviously Lestat is absolutely hanging by a thread in that scene. You can tell he wants to kick off, but you said he could be with who he wanted, and he was. It's an interesting one because it's quite a romantic scene, Jonah and Louis, I think, in its own way. It's kind of a reconnection. It's a hookup, but it's not quite as meaningless as perhaps Lestat and Antoinette, I think.
I think that's the big problem, isn't it? Because Jonah and Louis have history. They have, they've interacted on this level previously. Jonah was potentially, the first man that Louis was ever kind of with in
Yeah.
any respect like that, who was kind of part of his queer awakening. I think it happens a lot in relationships where, the first love or the first alliance or whatever is still on the scene. I think, for some couples that can become an issue, where you're friends with the ex. It's kind of that scenario, but on crack. And it's just, as we've said, Lestat is this lost little soul that just wants somebody to love him and to not leave him, and all of his anxieties and worries have just come to the forefront because his worst nightmare has happened. Him and Antoinette was just like a fling to maybe get a rise out of Louis. With Jonah, Louis has potentially found somebody that he would leave him for. And that's just heartbreaking to the Lestat because he's not ready to let this man go.
No, no, no. He's not ready to let him go in any way. I mean, he doesn't want. Lestat has never wanted an open relationship. I don't even know how open relationships with vampires would work, or not in the context of this show. In the context of Anne Rice's book, Lestat loves everybody. Everybody loves Lestat, and he basically ends up with practically a harem by the end of the books. But in this, Lestat is very much focused as his love, his energy, his attentions on one person. And I also feel that there is perhaps an element that he didn't expect Louis to find someone quite so quickly. Not that he has any I don't think that he views Louis as unattractive or doesn't think he's charismatic or anything like that, because of course Lestat adores Louis, and I'm sure he thinks he's the most handsome man in the entire world. But I think he felt that from the place that Louis was at when they started their relationship, I don't think he thought that he would pull somebody quite so quickly because of how obvious, as you said, nervous he was. Like Lestat is his husband. It was just like his coming out. We talk about it in the church, everything kind of being foisted on him at once. And obviously, they have now been together for 7 years. And it is like everyone knows that they're a couple. I mean, we talk about it really textually with Antoinette, but at this point, every single person around them knows that they are lovers. and that they are an old married couple, and their wealth kind of allows them protection from that. But I don't think that Lestat thought that that meant that we could get somebody quite so quickly. And I think that's part of, I don't know, maybe his superiority complex or his very limited vision sometimes. Lestat still doesn't understand the very difficult racial dynamics of the time. He really doesn't. And I just don't think he thought he could get somebody quite so quickly. And so obviously when he does, it absolutely devastates him. Because I just think that he thought that, oh well, of course you can have whoever you want, but he probably felt quite safe that, well, it's not going to be picking up one of the prostitutes from the Azalea now, is he? And they've not shown any male prostitutes in there. I mean, I'm sure there probably were, but it's all girls, isn't it? Because he gives the girls 5% of his business. Louis has riz, and he found someone straight away. And poor Lestat is just hanging by an absolute thread. And then we get Daniel back in Dubai talking about memory and underlying the key sort of theme for the series, because Louis notices the mud on Lestat's boots. And he can't quite remember whether it was raining or not, because how would you? And I like in that little sequence we have Louis kicking out Rashid for lingering. Again, just the kink in every single episode, the master servant kink. Extraordinary, really. I mean, when we get to talk about series two, like, I could spend hours talking about the roles that Armand plays. Like, does he even enjoy it? Because he's far too powerful and far too strong. But he keeps going back to the subservient role that he was forced into as a child. And yeah, the dynamics of that man and the way his brain works are just truly, truly fascinating. I think he's one of the most interesting, can't even call him a villain, but one of the most interesting protagonists the show has. I just think about Daniel at the point at which they reveal that he's Armand. Daniel must have just been sat there going, what the fuck was the past few days all about? Like, what is going on? You have been role playing your kink in front of me this entire time. No, unacceptable.
Yeah, I do sort of on the rewatch of knowing where the story goes, it is telling that Rashid is lingering in the background of this conversation where
Mm-hmm.
Louis is questioning his memory and the validity of that memory. It's a really nice touch because it takes a little while for Rashid to be acknowledged, but he is just there in the back of the frame, just behind Louis, as like again, as we've discussed before, just lots of foreshadowing from very early on in this program. They're having this conversation about memory not being quite as robust as it perhaps should be, with a man who is capable of just mixing your memories and brain around. It's very interesting on a rewatch that he is present for that conversation.
Also, I think what's really interesting is, as you said, he is very specifically here for this sequence which is all about Lestat, because Armand is just as much all about Lestat as Louis is. And I imagine any discussion of Louis' feelings for Lestat probably triggers a mild sort of panic in Armand, because he doesn't want those feelings to start being too strong or too wistful, lest Louis remember something that he doesn't want him to. So yeah, it's just a little touch, but a very, very clever one. And at this point, Louis's family have stopped playing nice. I mean, again, Louis, like, what are you doing, Louis? Like, you keep going over to them, because he's gone over to them, like, to spite Lestat. Like, his presence and his interactions with his family are all kind of to spite Lestat. He goes to them after they've had this sort of little argument and he's had this hookup. And obviously underlying all of this throughout the episode, which goes into full chaos at the end, is the business dealings with the Azalea, and the fact that Unsurprisingly, the men have been waiting just to fuck him over the entire time. So he's he is fully aware that there is this pressure about the fact that the council are passing ordinances to shut down black-owned businesses, to move them across an arbitrary line. So he's aware that all of this is going on and he's feeling really pressured. And it's like he goes to his family, I don't know why, because at this point is it obligation? Is it to kind of feel better about himself that he's clinging to his humanity? But he goes about it all wrong. I mean, his mother is a profound hypocrite. She's happy to take his money. She was always happy to take his money when he was being a pimp. And now she's like, oh, you've got the devil in your eyes. Come on, woman. You took his money for years. I mean, now it must be very clear for starters that he's not aging because he's been a vampire for 7 years. But I'm like, well, what's the bigger issue with that family? That he's not aging or that he's very clearly got a husband at this stage?
It's a really interesting thing. I think maybe he goes back because Jonah kind of almost reminds him, because Jonah's like
Mm.
calls on the house first when he's looking for Louis, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're getting ready for the party, the Grace's kid's birthday party," and then Louis kind of like, "Oh yeah, she had twins." It's like the family very much have faded from him, but I kind of feel in that moment it's like Jonah has reminded him that they exist, and he knows, yeah, that's probably going to get a rise out of Lestat. So I'll go and see them, and yeah, immediately they're not family aren't playing nice anymore. The twins are scared of him, which, to be fair, he is he is the epitome of creepy uncle, but he turns up in the dead of night with his red tinted spectacles,
I love those glasses so much. I love them. I think Jacob Anderson looks phenomenal. I want them, but I don't think I'll be able to pull them off. But he looks incredible. But you're right. He's shown up. He's showing up what, 6 months? This is the first time in 6 months he's been, and he shows up in the middle of the night with prezzies. I mean, the prezzies are nice. It's still not clear who is funding that lifestyle. Presumably Louis is still half funding Grace's lifestyle, if not entirely funding Grace's lifestyle, along with his mother. But yeah, like, dude, I don't know you. You just keep showing up in the middle of the night with presents. It's not like he's hosting dinner parties at the Rue Royale, is he, with Lestat? He's got a white husband, which they all know and are clearly unhappy about. Again, it's one of these things we just don't talk about it, but we're going to judge. We're going to quietly judge the fact that you don't have a wife and you certainly don't have a black partner. You have a white man, and then he just breaks the door off the hook, just sends it in. I mean, that must be terrifying.
Exactly. I mean, the kids, I completely understand why the kids are scared of their uncle. But I do like that this scene is finally Louis standing up to his family. His mum's
Yes.
like, "You're not coming into our house." And he's like, "Your house. I'm the one that's been paying for this house. Me and my white husband, we're the ones that are keeping this roof over your head. If I want to go into this house, I'm going into it." And yeah, it's quite nice because we've seen his mother has been so mean to him in the previous two episodes, but he's still sought her validation and her approval to
Yeah.
some degree, and he's kind of like let her comments slide. But here he maybe hasn't won the argument with the stats, and now he's come to win the argument with his mother and put her in her place finally.
Yeah, because I feel like, as you said, this is both a sequence of reconnection and disconnection at the same time. Because I feel, you're right, as you said, Jonah has kind of reminded him, hey, Louis, you know what? You do have a family, probably ought to go. And he gets to kind of be the big man with his family, doesn't he? Because he can show up with a present, he's beautifully dressed, and as you said, it's his house. But at the same time, he doesn't really have a place with them anymore. His mother incorrectly blames him for Paul's death, but I mean, is it even that? I think his mother just hates him because he's queer
Yeah.
and doesn't have, he is not who her son was meant to be. because she wants the wife and everything else. She wants the life that Grace has for Louis, and of course he doesn't. He's queer and he's got a white husband. I mean, I imagine that for a woman of that nature, that would be something she just wouldn't be able to get past. She's a complete hypocrite because she takes his money. She's quite happy to, and then she just insults him to his face. But this is, I think, him reclaiming his power in relation to her. But I think it is also sort of the beginning of him realizing that he can't just be a vampire and play happy families with everyone in his life, because things are going, everything around him is always going to change except for him. And this is all part of him questioning who he is, what he is, where his role in life is. And as you said, it's like a real 7-year itch, because he's now been a vampire for 7 years, and it's like, okay, where next? Because 7 years to a vampire is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And with the immortality sort of yawning in front of him, and particularly immortality with Lestat, who he loves, but I think routinely makes him feel small and emasculated, because like they have the discussion about the money, and Lestat is very dismissive, like, we don't need it, we've got other things. But Louis needs to be the big man. He needs to have the flashy whorehouse, because he doesn't want, understandably, to be Lestat's kept man, because Lestat can then, I mean, he is living under Lestat's roof. I presume most of the suits have been bought with Lestat's money. You know, nobody wants to be entirely dependent on another human being. And then you bring the racial dynamics into it, which Lestat really just doesn't fully appreciate or understand, and never does for the entirety of their relationship, unfortunately, because he just thinks that vampirism trumps skin color, and it doesn't, because Louis has to live in a world where it matters. It's a shame for Louis, because these should be like exciting I'm a vampire times, but he can't. He's got everything around him kind of holding him back and trying to make him be small and be compliant, and he's obviously kicking back against that. And then we get one of my favorite scenes in the whole series, Lestat and the soldiers. And it's just Lestat being the pettiest fuck imaginable. And that's what I love, because this is an absolutely innocuous scene. It's Lestat being the pettiest prick in the world, and yet the entire series does not work without this scene. It is the single most fundamental scene structurally for the entire show. It must have killed their budget, the sheer number of extras in it. But this series doesn't work without it. And I love that. I just love that I like the little sequence of Louis manhandling Lestat while he's literally twirling, because Lestat's just a crazed creature at this point, and he just wants to show a point. Oh, you fucked a soldier. Here's a house of 25, 30 of them. Please enjoy. I mean, Lestat, this is why can we not just have a conversation saying, actually, you know what? That open relationship? No, we don't want that. I do not want you out there banging Jonah. Me, please. Just me. No one else. Just me. But would he have accepted that if Louis had said with Antoinette? I mean, probably yes. I feel like all he wants is a sign from Louis that he loves him. So if Louis said, fine, but you have to kill Antoinette, I think he would have.
And it is, it's such a throwaway scene. It's kind of presented as, look, this is how much of a little bitch Lestat was. This is how petty a queen Lestat
Oh,
was.
I love him so
So he
much.
fills the house with your type, just to just to get that one up. But then, later on, right at the end of the second series, it all makes sense why this scene has been included. We think it's there setting him up as petty partner, but it's not. It's setting up the power of said petty partner.
And they don't even at this point go into the fact, like, we obviously see Lestat keel over onto the sofa and the blood trickling down from his ear. But they don't even go into it. They don't even go into it in any degree about, oh, this is something I can do, which I think is so clever. They just kind of leave it as, oh yeah, this is something that Lestat does. It's like, as Louis calls it, one of his tricks. And then it is so, so key for the finale. And I mean, Louis absolutely should have manhandled Lestat more. And that's such a fun little sequence where he just drags him and Lestat's twirling. I do think Louis never quite appreciated the kind of power that he had over Lestat from both sort of an emotional and sexual point of view. Because obviously all he has to do is say, Lestat, get rid of these people, and Lestat does it instantly. It's not like he doesn't, argue, he doesn't prevaricate. Louis brings out rarely the strong voice with Lestat and is like, no, gone now, and they're gone now. Lestat does it instantly. As soon as Louis gives a command, he responds in seconds. But I don't think Louis never quite realized how powerful he was with Lestat because he was so focused on, them being unequal. And then we get into the fact that at this point, Lestat has obviously told him absolutely nothing about vampires, about their heritage. We see as we go into series 2, he deliberately keeps a variety of different things from them that really he should have told them. Like a little heads up. Oh, by the way, there's a dude in Paris that's completely fucking unhinged and will probably try and kill you. Maybe don't go there. I feel like very simple rules. Oh, by the way, there are vampiric rules. Try not to break them. They're not that hard to break. So try not to. These are very simple things, but oh no, he keeps them. And he keeps them because he thinks if they don't know, in the same way that his mother, because he's completely repeating the cycle of abuse with his mother, they don't have the means, if they don't have the education, well, they can't leave him then, can they? Poor Lestat. But yeah, I love this scene. It's great. I love Sam Reid singing, the piano playing, all of it. It's such a fun little sequence and so, so important. And leads into the best scene, which is the I Heard Your Heart's Dancing, where Lestat reveals that, of course, he went and watched and glowered and saw Louis hooking up with Jonah. And I'm going to be honest, I'm impressed he didn't kill Jonah. I feel that he knows that if he did, Louis would be completely done with him. And he does abide by the rules of their agreement, except not really agreement because he didn't really mean it, but he didn't walk it back quick enough because he's an idiot. But he doesn't kill Jonah, but he does go and watch Louis hook up, which must have been torturous. And Sam Reid's delivery is just amazing. Have I heard your heart's dancing? I mean, it's so big, but it's like go big or go home. It's great. It's one of the best sequences, I think, in the series.
Yeah, and it's one of the best lines and the best line deliveries in the
Oh,
season as well. It's the one that you see all over socials, people posting because it's so powerful because I think Lestat's done a really good job at love bombing Louis until
yeah,
this point, but it's only with this thing of where you can see, no, actually, like it's more than that. He genuinely does love everything about Louis, and to see Louis with another man has broken him. It's broken his heart, and it's at that point that the audience kind of realize that Louis isn't a plaything as perhaps because I think there'll be some people reading it as Louis is just the next shiny toy to play with, and
yeah,
he's maybe getting a bit bored with this toy. But in this scene, it solidifies that no, this is this man's world,
yeah,
and he's
yeah.
just had it completely ripped out from under him because his heart was dancing with another.
And also I'm a bit much because nobody wants to hear their partner say anything sort of negative about them. And the idea that Louis was just like, oh yeah, I've got a partner. He's a bit much, that he's, too much for Louis, that you would hear Louis say that about him to another. Because Lestat is probably, fully aware of, he's very big, he's very gregarious, and he's wonderful in that. And obviously, his background as a performer is so intrinsic to who he is. And again, I think this is another sign of him that Louis doesn't love him for who he is, doesn't see him for who he is, because yeah, it's even if it's like the mildest thing you could ever say, somebody being too much, it isn't followed up with, and I love that. Obviously, Lestat is too much. He's a born performer. He loves the spotlight. He loves to twinkle. The books are hilarious because they're written sort of in first person, and like Lestat has the biggest ego in the world, which I think's actually been tamped down considerably for the series. And he's just a very open person. He falls wildly, deeply in love with every single person that he meets. He's just entranced by life and color and everything around him. And he is always going to be the biggest, shiniest personality in the room, and everyone's going to look at him. And that's who he is. And that is what Louis loves. But for him to see him turn all of that into a negative with Jonah, she said it must have absolutely broken his heart, because it's the one thing he remembers. It's the one thing he chooses to repeat because it's hurt him so badly. Then Louis responds with extraordinary brutality, because they've had this huge argument where he's like, you took my life, which again, Louis, come on. We're 7 years down the line here. You agreed to vampirism. You were suicidal at this point, but you are choosing to downplay your role in this. You are choosing to devalue your own power and your own agency by sort of being like, oh no, Lestat was the bad person that came and killed me. No, 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 no. You made that choice. You reached for him first. And right now, obviously, you're not feeling the relationship anymore, and that's fine. But he's sort of, by accusing Lestat and making Lestat sort of, the evil villain of the tale. No, Louis, we have to accept our own part in these things. And he agrees to be with Lestat, but obviously he doesn't want the trappings of being a vampire anymore. He doesn't want to have to keep eating people. And so we have this huge row in which Lestat, just as we said, loses it completely and starts talking about him eating dogs and all the rest of it, and how upset he is. And then Louis just comes in for the absolute kill by saying, I'm about to lose the only other thing I care about, because he says he's lost his life, he's lost his family, and now he's about to lose his business. And he says he's about to lose the other thing he cares about, which is the single cruelest thing he could ever say to Lestat, because obviously he's completely excluding Lestat as being a thing that he cares about. So he is like, Louis continually and repeatedly goes for the jugular in these situations. Like Lestat always provokes, and Lestat fans the flames of the fire, but Louis just shuts it down every time. He's so brutal. It's such an unkind moment. And I get it, because, Lestat cheated first and made him feel small, and this is the point at which they probably should be looking to separate, or at least give themselves some time from each other. But instead, Louis just sort of rips Lestat's heart to pieces in this scene.
I also feel that there's a little element of, throughout this episode, of just Louis being very hangry. We know that he's not eating the
Hungry.
diet that vampires are supposed to. So I feel like because he is more confrontational in this era, and it probably is that he's not eating right. We've all
Yeah.
been there when you haven't eaten. At the end of the day, you're very snippy and snappy with anybody that interacts with you, and with a vampire, that's obviously dialed up to 1,000, and then it leads us into Louis finally kind of giving in to his baser instincts and, going and murdering some people.
So, I mean, if you were like, in the last episode, that bunch of appalling racists sure sold the azalea quite easily to Louis, didn't they? Goodness, maybe they have decided to mend their ways and have accepted Louis as a fellow businessman. Nope, racist pricks sold it to him, because they knew damn well that eventually an order would come removing Louis's ownership of it, and they could buy it back from pennies on the dollar, like the absolute horrendous pieces of shit that they are. And I think this sequence is also interesting to show how little anyone has respect for Lestat. Because Lestat's whiteness, his money gets him through the door. It still doesn't get their respect because I think I imagine that they just see him as this queer, so they just don't respect him in that way. Because if it was anyone else, they would. But the fact that he is the co-owner is just completely ignored throughout all of this. They focus all of their bile and their hatred on Louis. And Lestat is just kind of, well, yeah, he's got money, and he's this funny European white guy that's come over, but he's queer and he's got a black husband, and so their respect for him is just non-existent. And so they don't give Lestat a heads up. They don't give anybody a heads up. They don't try and do anything. They are basically just trying to run Louis' business into the ground purely because he doesn't have the same skin tone they do. And this is where we get the no whites allowed sign on the door, which is amazing. But also insane. Louis, you are completely unhinged. And you're right, part of it is that his brain power is being so affected by his lack of food, because Louis knew that in that time putting that sign up would provoke a reaction. And of course it does. They're all breaking windows, and then they're increasing their pressure to drive Louis out. But it's sort of a perfect firestorm because he's already feeling small and emasculated because of his dealings with Lestat and Lestat's relationship, if it can even be called it that, with Antoinette. And he just feels emasculated. And then his business, because he is a businessman, and we see in the future he's a very, very successful capitalist king with an obscene amount of money, living in a country with terrible human rights records because it allows him privacy. So Louis' morality is certainly all over the shop, depending on his circumstances at the time. But he is continually is sort of, I mean, we can't even call it masculinity because Louis is not a hyper masculine guy, but his sort of sense of self is being eroded continually, and he's being made to feel small by everything and everyone around him. And that all just comes to a head with the alderman, where Louis finally erupts.
I really like the scene with the alderman. It
Yeah,
is one of the most horror heavy sequences. You
it
feel
is.
that
Yeah,
real unease from the alderman. I think the sound design, where you hear the alderman's heart beating and getting faster and louder, is really well played because you are bringing the audience into Louis's perspective 100%. We can hear what he hears, and we've not seen Louis be this monstrous before. It's
no,
quite nice to see. And I think, as we've touched upon before, in a lot of ways, Louis is the one that you need to be more afraid of than Lestat. Lestat will play with his food, and he can be quite mean, but the degree that Louis enjoys tormenting the alderman, saying like, "Oh, you're happy that your wife and daughter aren't here," and that it's this man is suddenly realizing that he's what are you, and he's like, I'm a vampire. And then it's just such a great scene of Louis embracing his vampire nature, but also just a nice sort of like horror sequence which shows that maybe Lestat isn't quite as bad as Louis. Maybe Louis not as fluffy as we thought.
what I love in this is that Jacob Anderson is so still and so serene throughout the entire episode. Like, he doesn't pop out behind anything or grab the alderman. He's just sat there quite calmly, waiting for him. And then when the alderman panics and shoots him, doesn't even flinch, doesn't bat a single eyelid. Um, because, and I mean, they are absolute idiots. You've got this man that kind of clearly hasn't aged in 7 years. And I imagine, I mean, 1917, it's just before the war, but so it's, the high times, the good times. But life was hard then, and people did age rather differently than they do now. And Louis has not aged a single day, is only seen at night when he would always have been seen during the day previously looking over his businesses. Like, did not one of them go, you know what, guys, we probably just don't want to fuck with this. Let's just leave him be, eh? Not sure how safe it is. Nope. They decide to go and mess with him. They decide, as we said in the previous episode, to dabble in fuckery, and they get the result. But Louis is completely unhinged. And he doesn't just kill him, he slaughters and displays him. And Lestat very correctly calls him on it when Louis is like, oh, I did it for my people. No, you didn't. You did it because you enjoyed it. These men made you feel small. These men looked in your face and they smiled and they were polite and they sold you the azalea, knowing damn well that in a handful of years they intended to buy it back for nothing and leave you ruined, because that's who they are, because they see you as nothing because of the color of your skin. And so he kills him and tortures him because he enjoys it, because why shouldn't he get his payback? There's nothing to do with his people, and he knows it will provoke the response that it does. And then he's like, oh, if it isn't the consequences of my actions, it appears that Storyville is burning. Yeah, what a shock. And again, we get Louis going in for the kill in the scene with Lestat, because Lestat is just delighted that, hey, finally, you've accepted who you are, you've accepted your brutal nature, we're together again. I think he sees it as Louis finally accepting who he is, and therefore accepting him, because Lestat can't divorce Louis' vampirism from him because he is his maker. So everything that Louis dislikes about being a vampire, Lestat takes it to heart as it being, he dislikes him, he rejects him, he doesn't want him. And so Lestat is thrilled that all of a sudden Louis has very unwisely decided to butcher a man and hang him from the gate. And of course, Louis is like, no, this wasn't anything that I wanted. And of course, at this point, again, Louis is protesting too much. He did this. He must have known it would provoke a reaction. And then he goes for the absolute jugular by telling Lestat that they're completely different, and that's why Lestat's always going to be alone. Goes for the one thing he knows that Lestat is terrified of. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. You do not fuck with Louis. When Louis decides to go for you, he will always go for the thing that hurts the most. And he may as well have killed Lestat in that scene for the brutality of it.
Yeah, it's such a savage remark. And again, as with what Louis does with the alderman, the consequences coming back, he's quickly going to regret saying those words to Lestat, because he's quickly going to need Lestat's help.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about it in our next episode, but we see the very, very different approaches in the series to Lestat. Sorry, Louis asking Lestat to help with Claudia. But yeah, it's so sad that in 7 years their relationship has gotten to this point, and if they could just communicate, I mean, if they could read each other's minds, it would all be mute, because they could see how much they love each other, and none of this would be a problem. But I always feel like that they are perfect for each other, but not at this time, because Louis needs so much time to grow into his power to feel truly equal, because that's the problem. He never feels equal. He never feels that he and Lestat are equal during their entire relationship. And so they can never be truly happy until he does. And yeah, but going for the one thing that he knows that Lestat is scared of, because Lestat has given him the one thing to wound him the most by telling that he doesn't want to be alone and going for his abandonment issues. He kind of leaves Lestat absolutely decimated and goes out into Storyville, where he's desperate to be the savior, because he can't quite yet accept the fact that everything that is happening Well, it's not purely as a result of his actions. That would be an offensive thing to say, because this was always coming. This hatred has been simmering away for years and was always going to end up in this way, this kind of terrible reaction of the whites and the racists against the black-owned businesses in the black-owned area. But it is specifically his action that results in this horrendous massacre. And so he needs something to redeem him. He needs to be able to be the savior to something or someone so that he does not feel as guilty as he does. And that's when we say hello to Claudia. And it is a beautifully shot sequence with wonderful music from Daniel Hart. But yes, we say hello to a troublesome duo's beautiful little girl that is going to cause them nothing but chaos and love and everything in between throughout their lives. But yes, as we end the episode on our introduction to the wonderful Claudia.
Yeah. And it's a great ending. I think the ending of the previous two episodes has been quite self-contained, and there's maybe been like a journey back for like another little powwow with Daniel, but here we are sticking in the past, and you've got this was it I could not save the Azalea, Storyville, the aunt on the wrong side of the wall, but I could save Claudia, my redemption. And those of us who have read the books or have seen the film know who Claudia is. We've been kind of waiting for when's she going to arrive, and we are teased her arrival, and then the credits play, and we've got to wait, a whole extra week to see, what happens and how that transformation goes about. Because I think again, it's quite different to what was in the film, and so yeah, it's a really great tease. And I think overall this episode, although it's short and it's much more of a slice of life in just that 1 year than previous ones, I quite like the episode. But again, when we look at the IMDb rankings, second from bottom, 14th out of 15.
Why? I'm not playing with IMDb anymore, because this is just nonsense. How can this be second from the bottom? It is an episode that is so key to the Louis Lestat relationship. I mean, it shows their relationship on the skids, but it also shows that the cracks in their relationship could so easily be fixed by communication. So it gives you hope that when they reconvene in the future, that they are not so different, that they're sort of the things that cause it all to go wrong, and obviously things do go very, very wrong, are not insurmountable. And it's sort of such a beautiful little look at their relationship, as you said, their slice of life just in 1917. It's got such iconic scenes in it. The I Heard Your Heart dancing, the entire sequence with all the soldiers in the apartment. And I mean, even for how structurally important it is, it's just fun seeing, Lestat twirling around like a little diva and Louis being like, Jesus fucking Christ, I got to get a handle on my man. What is he doing? And of course, it introduces Antoinette, who is both antagonist and kind of, yeah, I mean, I do feel sorry for her as the series progresses, because she is just a person that is there to serve a purpose, which is to hopefully rile Louis up, which he refuses to buy. He's far too clever for it. He's like, no, I'm not going to react the way you want me to. But I think it is a wonderful episode. It's beautifully directed. As you said, some of the best lines and best line deliveries in the series. And it's an episode that keeps the focus very much on Sam Reid and Jacob Anderson, rather than we have like some of the other characters come in and out, but it is very much focused on them. And it's so pivotal to the series as a whole, because we can't really trace the relationship until we know how they are with each other, and how they are with each other before Claudia comes along and is kind of a patch to a failing marriage, but she is their child. And we sort of see how their relationship progresses from there. But no, I do not pay attention to these people anymore. How can it be second bottom?
I mean, it is still 7.9, which is still very high. I think we said before, even the lowest rated ones are still around the eight point. So it's not like some other ones. But I think again, it's just testament to the show that it gets, even what is a really good, really important episode tumbles down because there's so much greatness that they've managed to create with this program.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, you're right. It's an absolute sign of how extraordinary the show is that you can't really rank them. I mean, I think there's only one episode for me that I don't love. I mean, it's still incredible, but just don't love it as much, and that's the series two premiere because it's very much, it's not a bottle episode, but it is very much a we need to get them from A to B, and this is how we're going to do it episode. Although it still features my single best favorite sequence, which is the you and me speech, me and you, at the end with Daniel Hart's beautiful, beautiful music. The whole world is beginning to return. Um, so even in episodes that you're like, well, that's not great, there will still be a moment that is so exceptional. You're like, ah, okay. But yeah, these rankings are crazy. I mean, they did. I mean, it's sort of these kind of listings always frustrate you. Like Variety just recently did a list of the 100 best performances of the last few years, and it was a crazy list. There were no Sopranos on it, which was odd, but they didn't feature anyone from this show. And it's like, well, they had some very recent performances too, and you're like, well, we're ignoring Jacob Anderson. I mean, I found Louis insufferable before Jacob Anderson came along. I mean, he changed the entire trajectory of this character in the way that I appreciate him. So I feel like he should be featured and appreciated far more. Sam Reid lost the Critics' Choice Award, as did the show last week, which was always going to happen. Shogun, I feel like certain shows come out of nowhere, and Shogun is a very, very good show. So they lost both of their categories to Shogun, but at least that was a degree of appreciation for the show as a whole. So I'm kind of hoping that as the series progresses, that comes more and more. But it is a real shame that Jacob Anderson didn't get his flowers in the way that he deserved for his phenomenal performance as Louis for the first two series.
100% agree. I think that wraps up our coverage of this third episode. Join us in a fortnight where we'll be looking at the fourth episode, which is the ruthless pursuit of blood with all a child's demanding. And as we've teased, we get
These
to
names are
delve into
insane.
Claudia. Oh, I know. It's
So
written down. I have to read written down because they don't just roll off the tongue.
they do not go out of time. I mean, it's very in keeping with Miss Rice's writing that they are beautiful and purple and super, super, super flowery. Purple rose and super flowery. But yeah, they don't. You have to kind of pronounce them because they're not something that rolls off the tongue. But yeah, basically, next episode is Claudia all the time, bitches, is what we should be called. So yeah, we're very much looking forward to that. You can follow us. Please do follow us. We are on Twitter at Savage Garden 0. That is the number, not the word. And we are on Blue Sky. Please come follow us on Blue Sky. It has less Nazis on it. That is Savage-Garden at Blue Sky. And if you want to send us an email, you can. We are on savagegardenpodcast@gmail.com. And obviously, we are on all major places where you can get podcasts, so Spotify, etc. Please do give us a follow. We understand we are big in America and big in Germany, but we would love to have more people around the world. So please do follow us. And thank you very much for listening.
Yep, and come back next time as we discuss Queen Claudia.
Queen Claudia. Can't wait.